Hi, this is Jessica Trudell with the Silverleaf Writers Guild. I'm here with Veronique Ginglo-Robert, who's also on the board of the Silverleaf Writers Guild, and we're shining a silver spotlight today on one of our members, Emma Hogg, who is a Northern Ontario author in Sault Ste. Marie. Hi, Emma.
Hi, guys.
Thanks for joining us. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
First, how about you just give us a little bit of background?
I grew up in Waterford, which is a very small town in Southern Ontario. And I feel like Waterford is sort of the base of where I've started writing, and also where it comes through in my writing as well. All of my books seem to have, these small towns as backdrops to the stories. So I really do feel Waterford was highly influential in my writing career. From there, I moved to Guelph, to the University of Guelph. I got a degree there. And then after university is where I really started dedicating my time and my energy and my passions to writing. I think I always loved writing. I always wrote. But after university was really a good time for me to totally delve into it. I was very lucky. I have very supportive parents and family and friends, and I had this gap between university and when I started my first job. So I decided that for 6 months I was going to completely dedicate myself to writing to see if I could write a novel, because people say, I'm going to write a novel all the time. I hear it all the time, but the number of people who actually write a novel is not as many as those who say they will.
Yeah.
So I think you have intentions to be able to be successful at something, but you don't really know until you give yourself the opportunity to really try. So at that time I said, well, you know what, I really want to do this. I want to give this a go. Let me see if I can write a novel. So every day I would wake up, I would write pretty much all day, or as much as I could before I got exhausted from it. And from that became sort of this base of my writing career. It took me about 3 years to finish that first novel, but that was a really good sort of indication that I really felt like I believed that I could do it. And now, years and years later, like I can't not write now. Like writing is so much a part of my life, and you're almost sort of compelled to do it for me anyways. So that's sort of where it all started, I think.
And what brought you to Northern Ontario?
That would be a family decision. My husband's career brought us here. That was about 3 years ago. We moved here, and I love Sault Ste. Marie. I think Sault Ste. Marie fits very well into, my stories as backdrops as well. It's a lot larger than my hometown of Waterford, but has the same sort of vibe, the same sort of feel, the community of a small town. And the book that I'm currently working on, it was fully written while I was living in Sault Ste. Marie. So I think that has definitely bled its way into the plot line.
When you mentioned that, a lot of people want to write a book and they never actually get around to writing a book, that's one of the reasons that I founded the Writers Guild, and I know a big inspiration too for Veronique in joining the board.
I think definitely whenever I have a conversation with a writer, someone who's just as passionate as I am about the craft that we're trying to explore, it's inspiring, because writing it's very individual. It's a solo, for me anyways, it's a very solo activity. I'm in my room alone in the dark writing, and you rarely sort of interact directly with other people about your writing. With the guild, for example, like that's great. It's like this community of people who are just as excited and being supportive of how you're spending your time and trying to be creative. So definitely, I think it's awesome.
So we're really glad that you're part of it. You were at the book fair in Sault Ste. Marie 2 years ago. You were one of the featured authors. What was that like, having people coming up to you at the booth, discussing your books and that sort of thing?
I think there's very few times where, you're sort of featured in, a particular environment. And it was really great to have that opportunity, to have that space, and to have that exposure, and just to be there for people to easily approach you as a writer. So that was great. It was great talking to other readers and other writers, and meeting all you guys, obviously. You guys have been awesome. You've been great supporters of Northern Ontario writers, which I think is great, because there's many of us, and I think we're doing some pretty awesome things. And it's really nice to get a little bit of recognition and a little bit of space to be able to share what we're doing.
what, if any, secrets can you share about your upcoming book? Do you have a publisher this time around versus before you were self-published?
Yes, exactly. So this next book will be published by Tidewater Press. It's scheduled to be published this fall. Actually, literally just sent it to my publisher a couple weeks ago. So that's pretty exciting. So we'll see the feedback I get from them, and we'll continue to strengthen the novel before the publishing date. Whether you self-publish or whether you go through the publishing route, I think, before you even come to that moment anyways, you have to write a good book, and that's all on you. Just keep working hard and write what you want to write. Try not to think too much about what your publisher wants or what you think your readers want. I think if you write what you want, what's your heart is telling you to write, I think at the end of the day, you're going to feel good about that as opposed to trying to write for someone else.
Do you have like a fine-tuned process now that you've been doing this for a while?
Well, I do have a fine-tuned process, and it's chaotic. I read about the processes that other writers take, and some people are very structured, and some people are very loose about it. And for me, when I start a novel, I don't really know what I'm going to write about or who the characters are. I just literally sit down and start. And as you just keep working and working, like all the ideas come to me while I'm working during that process of actually writing it, as opposed to sort of structuring it out. Okay, this is going to happen, and then this, and then write it. I sort of write it and figure that out along the way. When you get to the end, you sort of realize what your story is about and the theme and the purpose, what you want to say at the end of the novel. And it doesn't always align with how you started. So it requires like very heavy edits after that process, but I'm okay with that. That's what works for me. I mean, I remember one time trying like, wouldn't it be like great if I could just outline everything and then I could just write it. And then instead of having to write 50 drafts, maybe I could just have to write, 7 drafts kind of thing. But it did not work for me. It just was not something that felt comfortable. And then I would figure out everything. And then I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have to write this 300 pages, but I already know what's going to happen. And it was almost like not fun anymore. So for me, my process is just keep writing, keep moving the project forward, and very heavy editing on the back end. I write a lot of drafts. Like there's probably 30 drafts that go into each book. But I sort of skip all the pre-structuring of it because I do that through those 30 drafts of the process.
I definitely know several writers that swear by, outlining before they even start writing. Everyone kind of has their claim to a different process. Everyone swears that theirs is the best, and they just have to
and
do
you know what?
Works.
It's the best for them,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So each person has to figure out what works best for them, and just keep at it.
Any upcoming dates to note, like a cover reveal or anything like that we should note?
Right now, I'm just really focusing on trying to get the manuscript at the publishing level, and then we'll move on to the marketing and all the other stuff that goes along with it.
What kind of differences have you found in the process between your self-publishing your first books and now working with a publisher?
So far, it's been the same because my writing process has not changed, and I remember being very conscious about not trying to have the fact that I'm publishing this next book with a publisher to affect my actual writing process, or at least the first stages of that writing process. And I think I did a pretty good job of keeping that similar. So now, I'm just starting the process now of going back and forth with the publisher. So we haven't really started doing that yet. So I might have more to say about that in a few months.
Right.
But I will say, so far, I've had a great relationship with my publisher. They've been really supportive, and I'm pretty excited to be publishing this book with them, and I think it's going to be great for everyone.
How did you end up connecting with that publisher? Was it just a regular querying process, or did you meet somebody at a conference?
My novel, Winona Rising, was I had submitted it to the Whistler Independent Book Awards. And it ended up being a finalist. And then, so the winner was announced at the Whistler Writers Festival. And at that time, I met the 2 women who own Tidewater Press, and they had approached me and they said they read Winona Rising and The Fourth Wall, which they were a part of the award. I think their company helped sponsor it. So they did some of the reading, and they approached me and were very interested in what I was doing for my next project. So yeah, I was very, very lucky to have that opportunity and got noticed through that.
Well, that's actually a good point too, is that there's a lot of opportunities out there for writers to submit their own books for awards and recognition of that kind. But I think a lot of writers are hesitant to toot their own horn. They're like waiting for someone else to nominate them, so it feels more genuine. There's so many connections you can make at an event like that, and in the publishing industry, you never know what doors you're failing to open for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. It's really tough. It's really hard to promote yourself because you're right. You do, especially as a self-published author, you really have to be that person for yourself as well. And, I'll say this about myself. Like, I know that I'm terrible at that. Like, I am not a marketer. I'm not very good at self-promotion and all the things that you sort of need to get your book out there. And I don't want to be. I feel like I can really just be the writer this time. They take on the responsibility of the production of the book and the marketing and the selling of it. So I'm very grateful for that. So I'm hoping that will be a very positive experience for me. And then I can focus my time and efforts on what I really want to do, which is continue to write and do some art projects.
Part of your benefits of being part of the guild is that we'll promote your book too. We'll push it on our social media channels and stuff too.
Absolutely. That would be excellent and very much appreciated for sure.
All right, Emma. Well, thank you so much for being here with us.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Winona Rising is a coming-of-age story from the perspective of a 15-year-old girl. The novel was born from the idea that a portion of life happens not in reality, but in the abstract realms of imagination and dream, and that the experiences in these realms are just as relevant to the understanding of one's life. In the novel, I explore and play with these overlapping worlds. The main character, Winona Finders, struggles with her understanding of the world around her, trying to find her place in a new town, at a new school, among her peers, and even within her own family. She often feels she has to choose between her parents and almost always picks her dad, mostly out of fear of losing him. One thing Winona and her dad bond over is shooting free throws in the driveway. In the excerpt that's about to be read from the book, Winona is just 16 made baskets away from reaching 3,000 all time. Surely a Guinness World Record. Winona's dad had promised he would tally her shots when he got home from work.
As the sun dropped in the sky, my hopeful thoughts waned. Maybe my dad really had forgotten. Maybe he wasn't coming home at all tonight. I shivered from the cold.
Winona?
I jolted to my feet. Walking towards me was my mom. Under her coat, she hadn't taken off her apron, which was covered in a pattern of musical notations, wet from washing dishes. Matching the apron were her rubber boots, one white, one black, to resemble the two types of piano keys. She smiled, oblivious to how absurd she looked. Her pleasantness was infuriating, inappropriate on such a failed night. "Did Dad call?" I asked, my tone harsh, as if it was her fault he had forgotten. I pressed the basketball hard against my hip and threw the ball as hard as I could at the ground. It rebounded as high as my shoulder. Out of midair, I snatched the ball and launched it towards the net. Swoosh. When I turned around, the official tally booklet was in my mom's possession, her fingers flipping through the pages, the pencil in her grasp. "What are you doing?" I snapped, charging at her.
"I can tally your shots tonight,"
she said, pressing the booklet protectively against her chest. "No!" I reached for the booklet. "It's not the same when you do it." Her legs were firm like porch posts, dug 5 feet into the ground.
"Don't be ridiculous."
She wasn't going to budge. Her determination was so annoying.
"Go ahead, take your next shot,"
she said encouragingly. I exhaled loudly. I wanted so badly to reach 3,000 made free throws tonight. Maybe the judges at the Guinness World Records office wouldn't notice the change in handwriting. After all, the marks in the official tally booklet were essentially capital I's. How eclectic could a capital I get? What would my dad think about my mom taking his place tonight? Well, he wasn't here to have a say, was he? "Dad always stands there," I said, pointing to where his car would have been parked if he had been home like he was supposed to be. My mom shuffled to the left.